Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Fantasy Premier League show. I'm your host, Gally, joined by a guy who, in his name, has to remind us that he's top 28K. I am not in the top 28K. I'm not in the top 280,000. I'm not even in the top 400,000. But we're going to get to those scores and where we're at. But first, let's check in with Chicago and let's get a weather update from the Midwest. Bleeping cold.
It's freezing rain out there. The inside here is bright, right? Like we're bright inside. We're as bright as my future in this fantasy season, and hopefully it doesn't backfire on me. But yeah, weather's gotten better. All the snow that we had has now been washed away to turn into total slush. And if you have dogs, you know that this is probably the worst time of the year because all they want to do is go outside and track in mud and anything they could find.
Yeah, and if you had as much snow as we had in a dog like ours, you realize that when the snow melts, if you haven't had a chance to beat your dog out there, he will not only track in mud, he will track in probably things that he has walked himself through in sections of his yard that he shouldn't. This morning, Kelly's like, man, we really got to pick that up, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I can't even imagine how, because I mean, it snowed here and then it kind of went off and then it snowed again. So it was like this poor guy was out there. And our dog is such an idiot. He literally does the business in about a 3x3 section of a 3/4 acre fucking backyard. Okay. And he backs himself into a corner of the fence, which is nice of him to keep it in this small confined area, except for he's such a diva. He expects that thing to be cleaned on like a daily basis, on like the hourly basis. So when it snows and I can't get out there, I tried to even go out this weekend. Shit was all frozen 4 inches deep. So I'm like, I can't even get at this till it melts. And I can't even imagine what it looks like now after 2 days of rain to wash away all that snow. It's going to be the most disgusting. I might as well just light the backyard on fire. I told Kelly a long time ago I wanted the whole backyard to be pavement. Like all I wanted was like 4 pavers. And like I basically wanted an English style garden.
Yeah.
I wanted like 7 feet of grass that I could claim was a yard and a whole bunch of places to just sit around and like drink beers with my buddies and maybe cook out. And instead I got a completely flat 3/4 acre grass backyard with nothing except for my inability to mow it. So I get ugly grass all year long. But let's get into the fantasy. Because I could talk about my bad lawn mowing skills all day. We might as well talk about my bad fantasy skills. Oh, we're going to take a look here at our American Scouser Cup standings as we usually do. I should take this opportunity to say if you are viewing on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, please feel free to drop comments, questions in the chat. We would be glad to bring them up on screen and address them as they come in. So I thought it was really important that we made the graphics pretty big here so people could see how these standings are shaking out right now. Not just because you're in third place and inside the top 30,000, which is really great accomplishment, but just kind of looking at our top 7 here, you know, basically running total score from 1,268 all the way up to 1,349. Scores really ranged. No surprise when you have a movement like Ryan Horn had at the top of our leaderboard, that you're going to have a big week. 96 points is nothing to snap at.
Imagine if you put the cap on anyone else.
I actually looked. If he had Captain Jota, he'd be inside the top 100 of the world right now.
Oh, my God.
I mean, even top 475 of the world is an unbelievable accomplishment. You know, for a long time, unused substitute was the leader in the clubhouse here, inside the top 5,000, had a few rough weeks, is kind of rebuilding. So we'll see where that goes from there. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. Anybody but Saka, and, you know, a couple hundred spots easy. If it had been, I mean, I think if he had triple captain Jota, he might be first overall.
That would have taken a lot
that
of
close.
balls.
Yeah. Oh, it would have. But, you know, there's a sucker born every day. And sometimes that sucker is a lot better than I am because, well, I do things like make double transfers that make no sense. But we'll look at this further. Definitely going to keep a close eye on this, not only to see how far you can climb in this leaderboard. Can you get into second place? Could you maybe pip the top spot by the end of the year with a little bit of changes? Will you take a precipitous drop and just fall like a stone as soon as Holland comes back? There are so many different things and so many ways to look at this, and I can't wait to see how that drama unfolds. But we'll go forward with our conversation the way we always do, kind of talking about our main topic of the week. I think it has to be the big hitters and their current absences. So no bigger hitters than these two players in fantasy football over the last 2 seasons in the Premier League, 5 seasons for Mo. Obviously, news comes out. Just go in and out. We're just going to dance. News comes out that Mo Salah will be coming back to Liverpool, leaving the AFCON, African Cup of Nations, playing for Egypt based on a hamstring injury. Sounds like it's pretty bad. 3 to 4 weeks he'll be out. He could potentially go back for the final. Egypt basically needed him to get hurt to change their tactics, to play a different way, to actually squeak out 3 draws to even advance. So I don't think we have to worry about Egypt making a run to the finals without Mo. Holland, little different news, right? Some reports he was out in training. Others are more saying it was more like social media pictures and nobody's actually seen him kick a ball yet. Pep has ruled him out for tomorrow against Spurs. Take your stance about Holland aside and your fantasy. If you're a manager with $8-9 million in the bank, like me, waiting for your one transfer move, you roll the dice and bring Holland back in, knowing that if he plays against Burnley, that's a really great fixture, you want him in? Or do you have to see it for a few weeks before you can commit that money to the side?
I think the big question is, where are you going to commit your money elsewhere if you're not going to commit it in Holland? Because if you're stuck between a few so-so options that you don't believe in for 4 to 6 weeks, then why waste that money into that direction when you can just put that money into someone who you do believe in? I think even if Holland isn't fit to go against Burnley, he's going to be back then soon after that, right? So the big discussion here is, will we see him against Burnley? Will we not see him against Burnley? I think in either case, the question you have to ask yourself is, who else would you want on your team besides Holland? And if there are several names that you like, that you think long-term it makes sense, then do it. Because, truth be told, it has to be long-term unless you're willing to take hits when we're at this stage of the season. Because to move your team around, to fit in a guy like Holland, to fit in a guy like Mo, right, you're going to have to make big cosmetic changes to your team. And that's going to involve dropping 1 or 2 guys precipitously down to a really low level to be able to move up to Holland again. So I think, especially maybe in your situation, it's almost good that he's out against Spurs. Even if he was close, I don't think Pep would want to risk it anyway. Even against Burnley, let's say he comes on for the last 25, 30 just to get some running in again, he still has a chance to score 2 goals. Like that's just
Right.
what Holland does, right? So on the off chance that he is fit enough to at least be on the bench and maybe get 20 minutes, and you believe, and that's your long-term plan, then go with Holland. Don't second guess yourself.
Yeah, I have the money. The plan all along was it was going to be this week when I thought he would play last week.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, I have the money to go straight from Morris to Holland and then play Holland, Watkins, and Solanke. And eventually I'll drop Watkins down to somebody else, probably a lower tiered striker, and then maybe move back up. And that's how I'll get from, Saka to Mo when he's back. And that cash is there for me. I dropped Trippier, which, saved me a bunch of money, which was a good move on my part ahead of time. And I was smart enough on one hand, I just stashed Trent. So, all accounts, he'll be starting next week, midweek against West Ham, I think it is, right? Or Chelsea, on Tuesday. So I'm I'm confident with the way that I built my team. It's just do I want to use that 9 million and my one free transfer this week, or do I just roll that transfer, have two for next week where I could then make multiple moves and use the money to Holland? But again, like your point is, Carlton Morris is probably going to sit on my bench. Wouldn't I rather have Holland in my starting lineup? Like, just have him in my starting lineup, because he's either going to play 20 or so minutes and have a chance to score. Carlton Morris is going to play 20 minutes and have a chance to score, but he's not Erling Haaland.
Yeah.
And, Haaland has a chance to start and haul if Pep, does his thing where he just gives him the time. He gives him his 30 minutes from the start of the match, says, I'm going to play you a half, and he could get you 4 in the first half. I mean, it's Burnley. So I think I probably go the Haaland route. Worst case, you just get a guy from your bench filling in for him. I've seen some people out there saying, if Haaland plays, he'll start. Therefore, I'm just going to start Haaland and captain him and then roll it if he doesn't. But I'm too nervous that he'll come in for 20 minutes at the end of the match and I'll get a 2 on my captaincy, in which, it's been a brutal run for me and my captains the last few weeks. So let's take a look here at the ins and outs. Obviously, these numbers are a little different, being the fact that it was, it has been almost 2 weeks since these numbers have been being aggregated due to the, weird and odd double game week back-to-back program that they like to do to call it a winter break, which really means you have to play a League Cup match, an FA Cup, and a makeup match midweek, but we won't make you play one weekend of the month in January. Yeah. So that's brilliant. Let's start on the transfers out. We always go with the transfers in. Obviously, Salah and Son being heavy transfers out makes sense, especially with their clubs progressing. In Son's case, it looks like he may not be back until the beginning of March, actually, which is a really long time. Bowen, a little surprising because he did play after being flagged. I think Alexander-Arnold is one where folks in Holland, I just feel like people are waking up with all this money invested in players with a flag and they just drop them. But I don't feel like either of those people, of those 400,000 people making those moves, those aren't the tried and true folks who are playing this game like 365 days a year. Because I don't think there's logical reason, if you still owned Holland, to move off of him at this point.
Right.
And the same with Trent. If you held him for the 1 week that he missed, why would you get rid of him the week before he comes back? Any surprises for you on the outs? And what maybe do you think is attributing to the Bowen sales?
The Bowen one is the one that's most surprising because we can, like you mentioned with Salah and Son, that's easily answered. Trent and Holland, you're always going to have, there's 10 million people that play the game, right? Obviously, there's probably a couple million, maybe not a couple, maybe a million that are just sort of just dead ghost accounts for what it's worth. So you still have, 7 to 9 million active players. So to have about 400,000 of those just jump off because of flags probably makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Like you said, they're not someone who is paying attention to the game as much as others, like the serious, maybe not serious, but like the less casual guys. The Bowen one is interesting. The only thing I can see, and it's maybe just mirroring the transfers in, is that they're hopping off Bowen because they see more value in Jota, or they see the value in De Bruyne, right? And so they kind of want to get that there. And going off of Bowen, maybe they're going off of Salah and Bowen, and they're doing De Bruyne and Jota, and then they have a little bit of extra money then for Tony up front or something like that. So I think it directly correlates with who we're seeing come in. And so that's the only reason it would make sense. But if you're on Bowen now, I don't know why you would go off of Bowen specifically. It's not because he's going to get his chances, and he's missed 5 games for West Ham in his career. The dude just doesn't get hurt. Even when he's flagged, you can pretty much be sure he's playing.
I said it 2 summers or 3 summers ago. I will say it again. Liverpool missed the mark when they could have bought a player that would have been a perfect foil on the right-hand side for the offense, and it would have been cheap. It would have been 30 million. He's an absolute Klopp type guy. He never gets hurt. He runs his socks off. He works hard the entire time. It made too much sense at the time, and in classic fashion, they'll sell Mo someday, and they'll probably end up spending 120 million or something for a player they could have had for 12. And it's just crazy. And everybody knows, Klopp was in on him when he was at Hull. He was a big fan of him then. He scouted him and Robertson at the same time. No surprise, Klopp was smart enough to realize Harry Maguire was a dunce, and the other two would turn out to be studs. But interesting enough to see how that would all go. So, well, let's talk about those incomings. So you mentioned Kevin De Bruyne. No big surprise there. The big haul always leads to high influx in buys. Then you couple that with the fact that he's one of the most talented players in the whole league, and the fact that City is down Holland at the moment, which probably puts him back on penalties. Yet he's not guaranteed starts, and we know that Pep should and will be cautious with him in his minutes.
Yeah.
Have you brought De Bruyne into your side? Do you
No.
intend to do it or consider it?
I toyed with the idea. I think when we were on last time, I talked about potentially going down from Mo to De Bruyne just to kind of fill that City void, especially with Holland being out potentially and having more of that impact for Kev. But I don't see myself going in on him. I think part exactly like you're saying is that maybe if we get closer to April and I'm really looking to make a specific kind of push or move to get into whatever place I feel like I want to get into, and De Bruyne seems to make sense at that moment, and we've seen him for 2 or 3 months, and we know that he's guaranteed 70, 80 minutes, I think that's when I'd pull the trigger more comfortably. I think with how long I've sat on Mo now, it wouldn't make sense to go off of him, so I don't have a way to go up to De Bruyne. And so for me personally, I don't see myself going after him. And it's going to be one of those, maybe I just end up with no City players the rest of the year, which seems ridiculous. But if it works, I'm going to be A, super happy that it worked, and B, even happier because I didn't have to use any City or United players in my team at all.
Good luck with that. So let me ask you then, and kind of piggybacking off of that mindset, because I don't disagree with you about De Bruyne from that standpoint, but do you worry then without any of those assets of what that does to your rank with the idea that
100%.
they are massive scorers, and when they score, a majority of players are taking the big hit. And also, you're really comfortable keeping $13+ million on your bench for another month? I don't see how you can keep that much value sitting on your bench, and he is going to continue to drop in price because people are going to continue to sell him, which hurts squad value. Then when you rebuy him, so it's almost that mindset. If you sold now, and don't even say you bring in De Bruyne, buy whoever. I almost feel like now is the time to make sure you have a working playing asset. But I wouldn't overspend the money. I wouldn't drop to De Bruyne with this idea that my plan for getting off Holland or getting off Mo was that I would leave whatever money was needed in the bank to move from the player I wanted to move from right to him. So I won't not have a move back to Mo. It might take 2 transfers, but I'll get back to Mo, because for me, this game is about the top end talent and the high end players. But I think having them on your roster and not getting anything out of them, your team's pretty deep, but I don't know that it's deep enough that I would want to be sitting a $13 million guy when you could take we'll look at your team in a minute, but you could take one of your medium mids or medium defenders and move to a premium, even just for a few weeks, and then move. Or, I'd probably do it on the mid side, right? You could take a Gross and go up market. You could take one of your middle guys. The problem is nobody wants to get off Cole Palmer. Nobody wants to get off Neto that has him. Nobody wants to get off Gross because of Brighton's fixtures. Yet these guys aren't racking up points. They're just consistently blanking.
Yeah, I mean, Palmer is racking up points.
Well, Palmer is racking up points.
I don't disagree with you, and I'm sensitive to that. And it's a very high risk, high reward situation. If it's those things, if the players, the highly owned players, do get the points that week, yes, I will see a drop. But on the flip side, if they blank as much as they can, I will see an increase, because then that means usually the rest of my team isn't blanking in comparison to whoever I'm being effectively ownershiped against. I think looking at my team, it's just hard to think. Yes, I could move a mid up, but I every week feel like I could have 3-4-3 here, or a 4-3-3, or whatever the case might be, and feel comfortable. And so that's the reason why I don't necessarily feel like I have too much pressure to go off of Mo. But I do agree with you, and I understand that having that kind of value sitting there doesn't always make the most sense, and it could be better used. I just don't know if me going from Mo down to someone for a couple week punt is going to be the right punt anyway. Because then what if I have to bench someone in place of that, and the guy who I benched would have been playing and he scores more, and I would have felt good having him in the first place. So I think that's the only reason I'm coming from it from where I am, is because I see just fineness from the team.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely working good. And as long as you're comfortable with the moves, and then you should keep rolling with it. So let's stay on the ends here. I think Palmer makes total sense. Chelsea player under 6 million on penalties.
5.8, yeah.
Most important player in their entire setup. It's not even a question. He is clearly what they're building. They have built their offense around him, the way Pep built his offense around KDB. And that's saying something for a kid who just got to the club 4 months ago. And I do think in some ways Pep might be looking at it going, I knew there was a player, but I didn't know he was going to be that good this quick, because I can't see why you let that kid leave. And honestly, every time I watched him play for City, I saw the flashes of what he's showing with Chelsea. So it did, and sometimes I just think Pep just doesn't rate players. We've talked about it before. There's just guys that don't check the boxes he needs. He was never overly enamored with Leroy Sané. You could just tell from day one. He'd yell at him. He'd never celebrate his things as much. And Ferran Torres, very similar, right? You could just tell that they would find their way out that club as quick as they got in. Yet he would literally fight and chain the doors before they sold Bernardo Silva, right? He would do everything he could to stop him from leaving, and that's what a good manager does. So Palmer makes sense to me. Let's talk quickly about the other three.
I was gonna.
Ivan Toney.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say back, because I was curious, because I wanted to look at the Discord. Back at August 30th, this is when the transfer went through. We were on the Discord channel, and I had said, I'm surprised City only want around 45 for Cole Palmer. Based on the market, seems cheap. And plenty of people on there were like, no, they're definitely overspending for Cole Palmer. And I was like, I don't know. It seems like a pretty good deal. And it turned out that 45 million for Cole Palmer, in comparison to everything, has been pretty good business. So that's all that one.
You'd argue it's probably the best business Chelsea's done in 3 years.
Probably. Yeah.
Actually, best business they've done. And it's probably because for once they probably listened to the actual manager, and he said, I can actually tell you how I'm going to use them. So go buy them. And then he actually did it.
Can I just, really, because I'm on here, it ended up being 40 million. And we had Kazi saying he's super talented, but fuck me, Chelsea are nuts, which happened right after that. And then Bickler saying it's another weird acquisition for Chelsea, which at the time, fair. I think we were all kind of a bit weird. And then you go, smells of Carvalho, but 5 times as much.
It sounds right.
It's a fun little, it's fun to look back and see. Hindsight's 2020, right? I could have been completely wrong. And there are plenty of times I am wrong, but it's fun to look back and see what we were saying at the time.
It is. I think we should probably do it more often. We should just have random Discord reunions.
Flashback. Yeah.
And we just do a flashback, almost like a Facebook memory, this day in Discord.
Yeah.
And then we just fucking rip on each other. It would be a great little reel and shorts we could do. So Ivan Toney here. I I bet you Ivan Toney didn't think that he could move that ball and get away with it. Oh, he bet on it too.
Doesn't get old.
His brother bet on it as well. He bet he was going to score the first goal of that match for Brentford. Sorry,
You got
Ivan.
one more?
I'm actually not.
I
You
bet
got
you could come
kicked
up
out
with
of the
one.
game for 8 months for gambling, you fraud. I'm sorry. I have literally no sympathy whatsoever. People are like, it's an addiction. Yes, so is everything else they do. They quit smoking cigarettes when it doesn't mean they can't do it in their contract. You can bet. Nobody says you can't bet. You can smoke butts by the horse track like a 75-year-old man ripping up tickets and screaming at the ponies all afternoon, right? You can do whatever you want. You can bet on highlight. You can bet on rugby. You can bet on cricket. You can bet on anything you want. You can't bet on football, you asshole. And you sure as hell can't bet on games that you could sway the outcome to. And like, I do believe he had an addiction. I hope he got help. But like, I don't feel sorry for him. Like, I really don't. I don't feel sorry for Tenali. Like, I think all of this is ludicrous. And, and then he comes back and immediately just, first of all, the fact that Brentford gave him the armband in your first game back at the club, after you've been banned for 8 months and the club has toiled in like mediocrity because they haven't had the best player at the whole club, and you lowered your own value because no one knows what you're worth until you play some games and show you can play again. Like, and then you hand the guy the armband and let him walk out, leading your club out onto the pitch in his first game back. Like, it just reeked. A real coach wouldn't have even started him. He would have brought him on from the bench just to make him earn his way back. Like, it was maddening to me as like a guy who's like watched sports all his life and believes like sometimes mental parts of the game. So let me ask you, from a fantasy standpoint, is Ivan Toney worth more to fantasy managers staying at Brentford or playing in a high profile, high prolific offense like Arsenal or Chelsea the rest of the way?
Probably better off. Okay, let me say. Okay, I think if he's able to make a move to Arsenal, that's the only other club in the top 6 that he could move to that I think he'd be better off in. Otherwise, keeping him at Brentford fantasy-wise would be the best way to go. I think if he goes to Arsenal, that's going to be one of the best fantasy assets in the game, given what Jesus isn't able to do and the chances that Toney would have. I think it would make him one of the best forward assets in the game. And it's the only club outside of Brentford that I could really see him fitting in well and making that mark. So that's a good question, because at first I thought no way, but then yeah, Arsenal would be one, and I'm trying to think of another that would fit, but it just doesn't make sense to me anywhere else. So I mean, are you considering bringing him in at all?
I am. I'm going to bring him in. I mean, I could care less about my little rant there. Like, I'm
you got
be
points
totally
to
honest
earn.
with you. I would bring in the biggest piece of trash on the planet. Like, if I'm going to say it right now, because this is the type of heathen I am. The type of guy who yells at kids asking for T-shirts.
Got to clip this.
You get ready to clip it, because this is a terrible take. But it just this. I think I told this story once, and I try not to tell it too often because it has a baseball reference. But I was in a baseball argument about the Red Sox one day in a bar. Shocking. And I'd had a few beers in me, and I was talking about John Lester, who then went on to pitch for the Cubs. And at the time, I basically raised my hand and said, all right, listen, I'm no fan of cancer. And before I could even get my comment out, like 3 people at the bar were like, whatever you're going to fucking say, just stop. Like, just stop. And what I was trying to say is like, I would never root for anyone to have cancer or like, but if John Lester at that point of his career had never had cancer in the minor leagues, we wouldn't have this hard on for him because he hadn't done anything yet. He wasn't John Lester, the World Series winner. He was John Lester, the young kid coming up. And I was like, trade that son of a bitch for a big bat. And like, let's move forward. But I was using the, like, if it wasn't for cancer. So like, I could care less because I am like, I just want to win. I'm one of these people. If Man United called back Mason Greenwood right now, he'd go right into my fantasy team at 5-5. No questions asked.
I don't think I could. No, there's no chance. I
Yeah,
don't think
you
I could
say
do it.
that. He'd go right on my team. Because you know why? I have worse human beings probably on my team right now. I just don't know what they do. And this has always been my argument about pro sports. I don't pretend that because all the guys on Liverpool are good guys and it looks like we have this wonderful club. For all we know, man, there are just as bad human beings at our club
Sure.
or
Sure.
anywhere else. Like until someone is outed for what they do. And maybe I wouldn't bring in Greenwood. My point is if you're eligible to play, you're playing. Like if you're playing, like if you can play, you're going to be on my team. You know, to be fair, I wouldn't bring Thomas Partey in, and I didn't understand why the fantasy website had to tell me he was back in team training. Like anyone wants a $5 million holding midfielder on Arsenal that's fifth on the depth chart.
Well, last year, Granit Xhaka, that would have been not a bad choice.
Well, whole different story. But then again, they went out and bought Declan Rice and aren't getting as much production out of him that they got out of Xhaka. Yeah. Everyone criticizes Havertz, right? But the real truth is Rice is playing in Xhaka's role on the left-hand side of the midfield and isn't doing it as well as Xhaka did. And then there's people who tell you that Rice has been the best signing in the league. And I think he's been a great signing, and he's helped that side. But they're not any closer to winning the Premier League with Declan Rice than they were without him. So, like, this is where I think sometimes people have to look at these transfers and realize, like, it isn't all what it's made up to be. And I think this is a good little segue to ask you about this. Are you considering or will you consider over these 2 to 3 week period bringing in Diego Jota? I know you missed the boat on the haul last week.
And
you talked about it, and so did I. We both did.
We both said, hey, if Mo isn't playing and Jota is going to get some minutes, he is, and by the numbers too, he is the second best finisher in Liverpool's Premier League history. Like his conversion rate is insane. If anyone's watching that's familiar with American Scots in general, I've been known to be the Jota hater. I would
say not known to be. You are the Jota hater.
Okay, well, I always
you're someone who would say, well, you know, some transfers are good, some transfers are bad, and the results are there, but on the whole,
I always felt like his ability to finish, which is an important skill to have as a striker, overshadowed his inability to do everything else on the pitch. I think his passing is awful. I think he's got decent link of play if he needs to make a pass 2 yards away. But if you're asking him to make a pass any longer than 10 yards, chances are it's fucked sideways. And I don't think that you get enough out of him as much as all the fans love him and say about him. For some reason, there's just always been a part of me that hasn't felt so strongly about him. That being said, I do still love him on the squad. I think he has been in the perfect moments, in the perfect situations, and we can see that he is the finisher he is. And at, what is it? I think 7 point something million. If you're looking for a midfielder that is in that range, he is worth looking at. The only downside is that he does have a knack to get hurt and miss some time. He might get 30, he might get 60, you don't know. With Mo being out possibly extended a little bit longer than we had possibly anticipated, maybe a week or two more, there might be more room for Jota because as we see, it's most likely going to be a Nunez Diaz Jota situation. And if Gakpo's in there, it's going to be maybe Jota, Gakpo, and Diaz. Like Jota has a place. And so I think it's worth looking at. I don't think I'm going to bring him in. But I don't know what the hell I'm going to do because I keep looking at my team right over here and I don't know. I feel good. But what you said earlier keeps ringing in my head about just wasting some money and maybe just having another mid in there for just the sake of it.
Let's take a look at the fixtures. There was an announcement right before the start of this match week that there would be a double game week in 25. Brentford will take on Manchester City. City has, Brentford has quite the double there in 25. They get Liverpool and City in the same week. And City gets Chelsea and Brentford. So I know you just mentioned a little earlier that you may go the rest of the season without a City asset. Knowing there's a double game week 4 weeks from now, does that change anything in your mindset?
I knew the double game week was coming up. I know.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, man, you're gonna have to ask me in like 2.5 weeks when we start looking into 24. I think after 23, I will genuinely have a better sense of where I want to go with City players. Um, I did make my promise, and I don't care if it's gonna tank my rank. I'm a man of my word. If I do go for a City asset, it's gonna be Kevin De Bruyne. I cannot go to Holland because I said what I said, and I am who I am, and this is what I've got. But looking at the fixture list, yes, the City assets look delicious, honestly. And Villa and Brighton assets look great too. Arsenal, it's tough. I mean, you just don't know where to put your money unless it's on a defender right now. I feel like that's decent points, but across the board, it's hard to know what you'll get consistently with Saka. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see after the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all on the Arsenal front. I've been burned by both Saka and Odegaard. I think the City, I mean, I don't think you can overlook City's fixtures. I mean, that is a run of fixtures right there through 27. I also think that there is talk that there is a chance that Liverpool could also double in 25, and that they could actually make up the Luton match a week ahead, because this was not updated quick enough. So week 26 is the weekend of the League Cup final.
Yep.
So that's why you see Tottenham and Chelsea is already off the board here. So you know that as a Chelsea, you already have a blank in 26. You may have a blank as well. I have had some folks throw out a pretty interesting one, which I kind of did like, which was the idea of if Liverpool ends up with a double in 25, that it might be the ideal time to use your free hit. Because you can go to a team that allows you to triple up on City, Liverpool, and Brentford. And when you think about it, there are Brentford assets you'd like. And when you're remember with a free hit, if you're tripling up with double match weeks, you know the teams so you can attack the fixtures, right? So for that one match week, you can get your Brighton, you might get 2 Brighton assets against Sheffield. You got Estupiñán and João Pedro. And then you have Holland, Foden, and De Bruyne, or even go to like Alisson. Like you can go off the radar spending money in ways you wouldn't spend because it's a free hit and your team goes back. And so many people think about the free hit around like the match week with 1 or 2 games. Like, I really do believe people that like maximize the chips think about individual weeks where they can get the most amount of points. And I think if you have 4 matches with assets like Liverpool, City, and then you potentially look at even the others, maybe you bring in an Alfie Daughtry and you get a double match week out of Luton. Like you actually like can almost get, like, you can stack your team to almost have 22 matches for that week. And it was an interesting idea, and there are quite a few like attackable fixtures. Like even United. Like, do I love United? No. Would I maybe like Højlund against Luton? Yes.
I'd probably go like an Isak against Bournemouth.
Oh, and I just haven't gotten all the way. I was just grabbing like individual.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. Like, I think that's the part where you can say to yourself, like, hey, I might have 2 Chelsea players in my team, but I don't have to have them that week against City.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and I just think there is something to the idea around that, like, targeted model. And I think 25, if Liverpool gets the double game week in 25, I might seriously consider that for the free hit, because then you can make transfers going through 23 and 24, avoiding 25 completely with your mindset around the blank game week in 26, where you have to navigate not having Liverpool assets and Chelsea assets and Tottenham assets. Like, that is a lot to be missing from your side, especially if Son's back. So it's just an interesting way to look at the fixtures. I really love what, our friends over at Fantasy Football Scout does here with their fixture ticker. And I always, and by friends, I mean people that give me free advice and I don't take it enough and do poorly. But yeah, they do a really nice job with how they package up the fixtures and give you the analysis to see into it. This is like a 6-7 week period. You can have it run out to 10, 15 weeks, whatever you want. But we got a little time left here in the program. So we should just end it before we look at this train wreck of a team. But we will go into it. To be honest, I got good results from my defense. Obviously, Estupiñán, Pedro Porro, and Saliba. Palmer with a good output, just didn't put the armband on him. Everything else was just mediocre, right? Like, Neto was literally the best player on the pitch against Brighton. I think he hit the post twice and guys missed like 3 big chances he created. Felt like it was a really good guy to pick up, was a differential to make a move, and it did me absolutely nothing. Watkins in a really bad run of form right now for Villa. Bournemouth scores, 5 goals and Solanke doesn't score. Like, it's just one of these, like, kick in the nuts week. So, I don't know. I don't know where I go from here, to be totally honest, because I'm frustrated with this side. I don't hate it, like I said. I think, I can go Morris straight up to Holland. I think that's probably the move for 1 week. And then, because I only have the 1 free transfer, and then I have to do something to move off of. Like, I feel like I have to get Saka out of my team because it just drives me crazy. Just looking at his face and then listening to everyone make excuses of him for why he's, kicked too many times or he's on the ground too much and all these different things. So not really sure what to do here. Any recommendations from you that you think I should do? I should stay to my grips, and it's come this week, I'm going to have a selection dilemma, though, because as soon as I bring in Holland, Alexander-Arnold goes back into the start.
Yeah.
What 2 players am I sitting?
Ideally, that's a good question. Yeah, that's tough. I think it'll depend on where you go from, because you could go down from Saka down somewhere to store some cash if you go up to Holland, and then maybe use that cash that you went down from Saka to go back into Mo eventually, if that's sort of the route you're looking for. But I think, you gotta, like you said, you gotta look at the fixtures for next week. You're gonna see if it makes sense to. I don't think it makes sense to have both Saka and Odegaard starting next week, to be honest. So between those 2 guys, you just have the 1 free transfer, right? You don't have 2.
I just have 1. So it would be Morris to Holland, and then it would be waiting a week. So it'd probably be Saka to the bench. But even then, who's the second player going to the bench?
Probably Neto. I mean, based on fixtures, probably Neto. I think Bournemouth have West Ham away. It's not great. I don't remember who Wolves has, to be honest.
I'm not sure, but I mean, Palmer has Liverpool.
United at home.
Oh, that's you want to play him there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe Neto over Solanke then at that point. And so
I also, Liverpool's gotten a lot better defensively. Everyone craps on Liverpool's not defensive record, yet they have the best defensive record in the Premier League. And that makes me question whether or not even Palmer is a great shout at Anfield, a place that Chelsea notoriously doesn't play great. But taking a guy off on pens.
That's the only reason I'd keep him in, because if they do get that 1 chance, it's going to go on his feet.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I almost feel like the same thing with Neto. And if I was banking on which defense gives the other team's talisman a better chance, it might be United with their backup keeper playing the first time he's ever played for the club. Because the Turkish guy's going to play.
Yeah.
In the next game.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think that he hasn't been given a start yet, as bad as Onana's been all year long.
He's going to replace Onana.
They asked Onana to stay longer, and I was thinking if I were a United fan, I would have been asking Is it Cameroon? I would have been asking Cameroon if there was any way they could have called him into camp in December. All right. I guess we have to do this to end the show. So let's take a look at your squad. Moved a good 30,600 spots exactly up in the overall standings. Always love when a guy does such a bad job managing his team that he gets 13 points brought in from the bench. But good for you. Good on you.
It was smart because I knew on the off chance that Trent could play, I knew he couldn't. On the very off chance, could get points.
You would have
Trent.
transferred him out had you remembered when the deadline was.
Yes, okay. I did get a little lucky. I did, just slightly.
You did.
It worked out in my favor. You get lucky and you get unlucky. That's just how the game goes.
Absolutely. Almost as unlucky as not bringing in Gabrielle and bringing in Saliba instead.
Yeah, that's
an unlucky move.
Yeah.
But so what are your plans for this week?
Well, thankfully the week doesn't start till Tuesday, so I've got a little bit more time to sit in my thoughts. De Bruyne has been living in the back of my head now since we started talking about it earlier. And if there is anyone that I'd want to move off of Mo to, that gives me an easy way to get back into him if I need to, it would be De Bruyne. So I could see that because then I could drop Gordon if I needed to, and I could drop Solanke if I needed to. And I have a little bit of room to make that happen. So right now, I might just stand pat and, maybe lose a little bit more value in Mo, but end up getting another transfer that I could get a better sense of what De Bruyne is like and then feel more comfortable doing that. Because I don't think we see Mo till late February. So that's going to be a few weeks where we're going to need something there. And maybe just having an extra week to look at Kev will do me exactly what I need to. Actually, I'm moving off of Taylor to Estupinian. Now that I say that, I should have mentioned that. I think that's what I'm doing right now. So forget the 2 free transfers next week because I wanted Estupinian because I forgot to put him in last week, and that would be it. There.
And that's a good move. I mean, they have great fixtures. He's attack minded. I will say their goals have dried up. Brighton's goals have, they're not scoring the way they were last year and even earlier in this season. So they definitely need to figure that out. I think that comes down to the whole idea that I don't think De Zerbi really knows. De Zerbi knows he has to play João Pedro, and I don't mean he has to play him because they spend a lot of money on him. He knows he has to play him because he's one of his best players. I genuinely don't think he knows how to use him. And I don't think it works when he and Ferguson are on the pitch together.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem because they are both the 2 biggest threats to goal. Right? Threats on goal, the 2 of them are their biggest. And they represent that the most. And I just think that it's something that they have to figure out. We all said earlier in the year, Liverpool has to figure out how to play with Darwin Núñez on the pitch. And I would say outside of people just overly clamoring on the misses, if you actually look at the run of play, especially over the last 4 or 5 games specifically, but really the whole season as a whole, this team operates better when Darwin is on the field. I know in Discord, and we can go back to our Discord conversations, we love to talk about all the things that happen when Cody Gakpo's on the pitch. And it's like writing a note to yourself in a diary that you read a week later, and you're like, man, this didn't make sense. We said everything was so much better, except for we scored less goals, gave up more goals. Sometimes stats do bear out results, right? And for all the clamoring about Darwin, really, the team scores more goals, has more big chances created, and he plays a role in those big chances created. Now, he also takes a role in some of the misses, but it's also the defending, the way that people have to play against us that then makes the players around them better. And as soon as he figured out where he fit in the tactics, I feel like it worked. And I think that's what we run into with some of these other players as well. You know, we didn't talk about some of the guys who moved teams, like Calvin Phillips went to West Ham today. I don't really think that has an impact on fantasy too much. There's still some talk that some of these younger players may be loaned out and players may move. Like there's still talk that Nketiah could be sold. Or even Broha from Chelsea, from like more of like a balancing the books. I don't think either team wants to sell those players. I just think the financial fair play requirements that are out there and these, you know, impending sanctions are really starting to scare teams. And it's such a financial benefit to sell an academy player, right? Because it just immediately gives you 100% profit and moves you so close to balancing your numbers that maybe one of these younger players that did come up gets moved. And like a guy like Eddie Nketiah, if he goes to Crystal Palace, he goes straight into my side and he starts every week for the rest of the year. If you give me a sub $6 million striker that I know can score goals and you put him in a team that gets 90 minutes every week, I'm all day. Yeah. Right? Like I wouldn't even think about it. But we'll get you out of here on this. Do you think the lack of activity in this winter transfer window by the Premier League is a direct result of all of these sanctioned, pending sanctions? Or do you think clubs are just wisening up to the fact that, you know, I mean, this same time last year, $880 million was spent by Premier League clubs. As of the 25th of January, the Premier League has spent $47 million, including loans.
Yeah, I think 90% of it is based on the sanctions. I think 10% of it could just come down to overall fear in market value. I think what we saw over the summer are a lot of players that were sold for a lot more than they probably should have been, and teams don't want to get trapped into spending the kind of money that they don't need to spend. And so January tends to be the period where you overspend. So by not doing that, by not spending it all, you avoid doing that. So I think that's about 10% of it. But the rest is definitely down to the sanctions. I think if teams had more of a green light, we would see a lot more activity. But what the fuck do I know? I'm just sitting here in Chicago.
I'll get you out of here on this with your last prediction, and we'll be back next Thursday to ridicule you for your comments. Do you anticipate any other major, minor, or mediocre deals to go through that may have an impact on the fantasy game when it comes to the Premier League? And Eric Dyer going to Bayern doesn't count.
No, but I think a Trippier going to Bayern might mess around with some Newcastle assets. That's one where it's more of a detriment to your fantasy assets for that team than it is a gain.
So, except for Kelly Gallivan, who still has Livramento at 4.3 sitting on her bench.
I love Livramento. I think he'll be just fine. I think it'll just take some more time before he gets to that point.
It was just a joke because I joked with her the other day, you're going to get rid of this guy. And she was like, well, I like that guy. She had him this is her problem. She has a guy last year that like she had Livramento for like 8 weeks at Southampton last year.
So did I.
And he crushed. Perfect. So she was like, as soon as she saw that he was like playing again for Newcastle, she's like, I'm getting him and I'm playing him. And then like 2 weeks later, he was benched again. And I was like, see, this is the problem with $4 million defenders that are really backups. But in classic Chris/Kelly Gallivan fashion, she says, I'll keep that guy. He's going to play again. And I say, that's stupid. He sits behind Trippier. And the next morning I wake up and the news say, Bayern Munich want to buy Trippier. Trippier wants to go to Bayern Munich. And I'm like, what the bleeping Christ?
Kelly the fortune teller.
How does this shit happen? I'll tell you how it happens. She's smarter than me. So, want to talk about being smart? Get smarter. Get over to the YouTube page right now and subscribe to the channel. Get all kinds of updates on our content. We do 3 morning programs, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 Eastern, 9 Central, here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It's the Morning Coffee Show brought to you by our friends and partners at Reckless Coffee. Nice mug you got there.
Smash that like button. Like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Like and subscribe. Smash.
God.
That's enough. Thank you very much. I will say, as I tell every time I hear it, so much better now that we have the audio only clip, so we don't have to see the gunsless, shirtless, sleeveless Bickler doing the smash that like button. But seriously, we would like you to subscribe to the channel, leave feedback, let us know how we can do things better. Don't forget to check out the website. We have articles coming out. We have our interactive supporters map, where you can find all the different places if you're traveling that you can watch our Reds with fellow Reds. So if you aren't already checking out the website, go into the Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, all the good stuff, please go ahead and do that. And for myself and my fearless partner inside the top 30,000, we're going to say good luck to you this week. Have a great week. Get your transfers in. Don't forget, it's a Tuesday lunchtime kickoff, I think 2:30 Eastern. So you're going to have a 1 p.m. deadline on the East Coast, 12 Central, and, of course, 10 a.m. on the West Coast. Get in, get your changes, send your comments, and as always, we appreciate you viewing, and we'll be back next Thursday night. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.